Welcome to Mac Stories Unwind, a weekly review of everything Mac Stories and more. I'm your host, John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Mr. Federico Viticci, Editor-in-Chief of MacStories.net. Are you ready for WWDC, Federico?
I think I am. Hi, John. How are you?
Did you like that intro? That was your formal Mr. Boss Man of Mac Stories.
Very formal. And I'm not used to it. I'm not used to it. So, but yes, I think I am ready. I'm very, very excited, as we're going to talk about shortly. It's a different type of WWDC. It's sort of, for me, it's sort of like going back to my roots. And by roots, I mean 5 years ago when I used to follow WWDC at home. And
Right.
then I started going to the United States to actually attend the conference. I was lucky enough to attend the last WWDC in San Francisco before
Right.
Apple moved it to San Jose in 2017. So
2016.
in
Right,
2016, I went to San Francisco. And from 2017 onwards, it's been in San Jose. And this year, it's like 2015 all over again.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's new for me. I've been going every year since 2013. And so I actually don't think I really followed it that closely in years before that. So I've always gone, and it's very weird for me, man. I'm going to miss hanging out with you guys and everybody else we know, but it's going to allow us to do some expanded coverage. And so I think we got to get started with what we did this week on Mac Stories, because there's a lot of ground to cover. And probably the most important thing for next week, at least, is an announcement that we posted on Thursday about what we're going to be doing for WWDC this year. And we've expanded coverage because, like you said, you and I and Alex and Ryan, we're all going to be home covering this. So we decided, we're going to take advantage of that time and do more than we've done in the past. And we'll have kind of the same usual coverage that you expect on Mac Stories on the website, starting Monday with the keynote through the State of the Union and sessions, and, digging really deep into all the announcements, creating overviews, roundups, finding all the interesting little details that come out during the course of the week and reporting on those for everyone. But we're really going to expand App Stories. You want to cover that one?
Yeah. So the idea, so we started talking about this a while back, actually. And the idea was, because it's going to be a different WWDC than usual, we're not going to be in town. We're going to have more time because we're going to be at home. We might as well use our time to expand the usual coverage that we do. And there's only so much that we can expand in terms of Mac Stories, in terms of articles and writing. We do the overviews. We do the really in-depth overviews of each OS update that Apple announces at WWDC. And then throughout the week, we do links, we do other articles, we do roundups. But there's only so much that you can do there. And so when we started looking at, from an editorial perspective, at what are the things that we can do more, and we saw, well, usually we only have one episode of App Stories, and it doesn't even come out during the week of WWDC. It comes out the following Monday, unless we decide to change the schedule. But what if, instead of doing a single WWDC-related App Stories episode, what if App Stories became, just for this event, just during this particular week, what if it became a special series? And so the idea was, there's going to be sessions every day. Well, at least we thought that was going to be the plan, and fortunately, we were right, because Apple itself
Right.
later announced we are going to post session videos each day at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and we were like, perfect, that was exactly our plan. So our idea was, we're going to follow along with WWDC as it unfolds. So we're going to cover the keynote right after it happens. We're going to record an episode of App Stories that will come out on Tuesday with our keynote reactions, and we're going to follow along with the State of the Union. And every day we're going to watch the sessions. And from Tuesday to Friday, we're going to have daily episodes of App Stories, and we're going to focus on some of the big highlights from the conference. And so I think it's it hasn't happened yet, so I cannot say it's worked out well. But I think I'm very excited for it, because I think it's going to be fun, because I think it's a cool format, and because I think the App Stories format, we don't do 90 minutes episodes, we do 30, 40 minutes episodes. And that lends itself well to this kind of content, this kind of sort of a modular approach, if you will, of we're going to take a look at specific features, specific sessions, and we're going to follow along, the conference with the rest of our audience who's also stuck at home. So I'm very excited to switch things up a little and do this.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And on top of that, we're going to still do our weekly episode of Mac Stories Unwind on Friday. And we'll use that to kind of wrap up the whole week and put a bow on it. And then on Saturday, we're going to actually be publishing for club members our weekly newsletter one day later than usual on Saturday, both to give us a little time to get the writing done and to make sure that we can cover everything that we want to cover there that's related to WWDC. And you and I will also be doing Mac Stories Unplugged, which is the club podcast. So you and I are going to be talking a lot next week. We'll be talking 5 days in a row and putting out, I guess, 5 podcasts or 6 I don't even remember. I guess it's 6. So, or 5. Yeah, I'm losing my mind, Federico. I think 6, actually. So
You're
it's
already losing your mind. We haven't even begun and you're already
I know. I'm going to get some sleep this weekend, so I'll be good. All right, so that's what we're doing for WWDC. We should probably get into a little bit of what we covered this week on the site because there's a lot going on there too. Because as we have the run up to WWDC, Apple often announces things and does things. So there's been some news, and there've also been some reviews and apps updates and that sort of thing. And the first 2 things I want to cover is first I want to talk about the Indie Sticker Pack, which is a charitable sticker pack of over 100 stickers of indie apps. And these are really, this is like a who's who of some of the favorite Mac Stories apps that we cover all the time on the site. And so for $13, you can order this sticker pack, and the proceeds go to the World Health Organization's COVID-19 Solidarity Response Fund and to the Equal Justice Initiative, 50-50 split between those 2 charities. Both great charities. As I said, over 100 stickers. It's available for a limited time. This was all organized by by Sam Gold and the team behind the Nighthawk Twitter app.
Right.
It's a great idea, and I was really glad to see it and see so many of our favorite developers and apps come get behind this and make it available. Because, usually when you go to WWDC, what you come home with is a bunch of stickers from all your favorite apps, and nobody has that opportunity this year. But this is a great way to both help a couple of charities and to get stickers too.
Yeah, if you read Mac Stories, you're going to know so many of these apps. You have Twitterific, you have Highlight, you have Apollo, you have Drafts, Bear, Highlights, Lookup. All of our favorites are in here. So I think it's a really good idea for a really good cause and a very interesting approach, again, to, because of the pandemic, one of the best aspects of WWDC is coming up with all the swag that you get from developers.
Right.
And this is sort of like a virtual version of that. Or if you buy the physical sticker pack, it's a physical version of that, which I personally did. So I have about 100 stickers coming at some point via mail.
I did too.
So that should be fun. They're gonna cover my Magic Keyboard for iPad Pro. So it's gonna be like I went to WWDC in a way.
Yeah, you reminded me too that there's also an iMessage sticker pack for $1 that you can get on the App Store, and I downloaded that as well, and we've been exchanging some of those stickers already. So it's a lot of fun. All right.
So we also got the first set of winners for the Swift Student Challenge, which is a new challenge that Apple did as part of the WWDC festivities this year. Apple announced in total, I believe, 6 winners. 3 winners were highlighted in a press release, and 3 more were profiled in an App Store story. We did an article on Mac Stories about, and I'm gonna get these names wrong, and I'm sorry, I apologize. Sophia Ongel and Palash Taneja and Devin Green, the 3 winners for the Swift Student Challenge, which required to submit a Swift Playground creation to Apple. Sophia created Read-On, which helps survivors of sexual assaults access resources in a safe and sensitive way. Palash Taneja worked on a Swift Playground that teaches coding while simulating how a pandemic moves through a population, which is a very fascinating idea. And Devin Green, he worked on, this is kind of fun. He was having trouble waking up in the morning, which is, I think it's something that we can all relate to. Yes. And so he created this program that uses a pressure mat under his bed. And when that is activated, when he's supposed to be up, an alarm goes off on his phone, and the alarm does not stop until he uses the iPhone to scan a QR code. So I kind of love this entire workflow that he put together to make sure that he gets out of bed.
It really sounds like something you would come up with.
It really does sound like something that I would do, honestly. And in the App Store story, Apple highlighted 3 more winners: Maria Fernanda Azolin, the creator of Dress App; Ritesh Kanchi, the creator of Stem Pump; and MacStory's favorite, Lars Augustin, the creator of Charcoal, which is a really, really good iPad drawing app that I can confirm Sylvia has used as well on the iPad Pro with the pencil. Really, really excellent utility if you just want to sketch out an idea or, create a drawing very quickly with minimal controls.
She did a really nice drawing of Ginger, right?
Of Zelda.
Oh, Zelda.
She's still working on Ginger. She promised Ginger she's gonna make one for her as well.
Okay.
But yeah, Charcoal is really good, and so I was really happy to see an app that I use and that I know be on this list. But also, yeah, very cool of Apple to highlight 6 of the 350 winners. So I suppose there's gonna be a gallery or more stories, more interviews soon on apple.com and on the App Store.
Yeah, I hope so too. Speaking of WWDC, there was more information that came out this week as well, and we had a news story on that. The one-on-one labs are going to be available by request every day during the conference. I don't recall the exact hours. I think they start Monday, kind of like afternoon to evening, and then the rest of the days from early morning until evening. And if you want a lab, you make a request, and I guess you'll hear relatively quickly whether or not you get it. So that's interesting. And the forums should be, by the time we publish this, should be up. The forums were being updated so that everybody can see them, but you have to be a paid developer in order to actually ask a question. On top of that new information that we got, we also got for the very first time a Mac app for the developer app. So the Apple developer app, which used to be called WWDC, became developer sometime last year, I think. And now there's a Mac Catalyst app version of it. It's not the greatest Catalyst app, I got to be honest. The text is a little tiny. But it's serviceable, and I think it's another way to watch the videos. So I'm glad that it's there. It just could use a little bit more work, I think, on the design and UI, but it's there.
We also published a story that was originally posted in an issue of Cloud Mac Stories, the Mac Stories Weekly newsletter a while back. And it was a very good story by Ryan about Apple TV and channels, the Apple TV feature that is supposed to aggregate all kinds of sources for TV shows in a single unified dashboard in the TV app. And the story that Ryan published a while back was so good that I thought this needs to be on Mac Stories as well, because it's a very important topic in terms of how channels is a great feature and it makes for a great TV experience. However, channels is failing because of the lack of adoption from some of the major players, including Netflix and Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, Hulu, and now HBO. HBO, which used to be part of channels, but now as part of the HBO Max launch, not only is HBO Max not available as a channel in the Apple TV experience, but HBO has also pulled, correct me if I'm wrong, the old HBO integration from Apple TV. So now you can only access HBO content via the HBO apps. They're completely gone from channels.
Correct. I got to interrupt you just for a second because I actually got HBO as a channel on purpose so that my kids who don't live at home anymore could also use it because of family sharing, and now they can't. So I'm kind of sad, but I guess maybe it doesn't matter because I'm still subscribing, but it is a bummer.
Yeah, and it's that kind of feature that is uniquely Apple. It's a unified dashboard. You don't have to think about it. It's entirely managed by Apple and your Apple ID and your App Store account. So you have family sharing built in, and it's very intuitive. You don't get any ads. You don't get any tracking. However, third parties need to explicitly support this feature. And unfortunately, because of the ongoing TV streaming wars, each of them is basically creating their own walled garden and proprietary service. They want to lock you in. They're not interested in participating in this Apple initiative, which it's not great, but I sort of understand. Here's the point. I kind of understand why Netflix and in Disney Plus, they want to make sure that they completely control your TV watching experience.
Right.
I know that it's not good, but I understand why Netflix may want to say, why should I give up the video player, which is the most important feature, where I get all my data tracking from? And I'm not saying that that's justified, all the tracking that these companies do, but I understand their position, and I understand why it may be, maybe not the best idea to collaborate and say to Apple, yeah, we're going to give you complete control over how people initiate watching videos from our video provider service. I know it's not great. Personally, as a user, I very much prefer channels, but I'm not surprised. Here's basically the conclusion of it. I'm not surprised that it's not taking off, because so many different companies are investing so much money into building their own services. It kind of makes sense that they don't want to cede any control whatsoever to Apple, which is also a competitor to them with Apple TV Plus.
Right. And it's not just the app control. It's also the fact that the terms of family sharing are generally, I've found, more generous than any of these services on their own. For instance, like Hulu in the United States, if you use Hulu for more than, I think it's about 2 weeks on a different IP address, it will cut you off. So it's almost like it has to be a local network. They need to know your Wi-Fi network. Yeah. And once you're off your Wi-Fi network, they boot you off. All right, let's move on to Adobe, because Adobe added integration between their iPad versions of Lightroom and Photoshop for iPad. And what it does is, once you're in Lightroom, there's a share button, and you select it, and you can choose to edit in Photoshop, which takes the file that you're working on, converts it to a PSD, which is the Photoshop file format, uploads it to the Creative Cloud service, and then kicks you into Photoshop, downloads the file again, and opens it up. And then there's a big blue button in Photoshop that says, allows you to send it back to Lightroom if you want. And if you do that, it sends it back as a PSD, so that then you'd have two versions of your image. You'd have the original file format and a PSD. You could also just save it in Photoshop and Creative Cloud or whatever if you want. There's a whole bunch of other things that came with Lightroom this week, updates that you should check out in this article on Mac Stories, because they're both on the desktop and on the iPad. I know you have a very good story about Photoshop that maybe someday we'll be able to share.
Someday. We'll talk about it someday.
But I was really happy to see this, because this is one of those things that when Photoshop for the iPad came out and it didn't integrate with Lightroom, people were just shocked that it didn't integrate. And now, the Photoshop came out last November. We've had now another 7-8 months, and it's now integrated. So it's great that they're doing that. I think both apps, especially Photoshop, still has a long way to go, but it's getting there little by little. So next, Federico, why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened with Fantastical this week?
Yeah, Fantastical got a big update to version 3.1, which in addition to a lot of fixes and improvements, there's two key features that I like to point out. The app has now native integration with some of the most popular video conferencing services like Zoom and Google Meet and WebEx, all of those services. The idea would be that if you have an event that has a link to a video call that you're supposed to be on, you will get a join button in Fantastical that makes it super easy to join the call and open it in a web browser. And there's some nice touches in that the join button does not appear in the calendar until it's close to the event. So when it's like 15 minutes to the event, or 10 minutes, you will get a join button. On the iPhone, on the iPad, and even on the Mac, you can also get that button appear in the menu bar, which is a very nice touch. So native integration for joining video conference calls, very timely update considering the global pandemic going on and the fact that we're all working from home and being part of so many more video conference calls. I think it's a very clever idea. And the other feature, which is something that I've always wanted to have in Fantastical, and especially on iOS and iPadOS, is support for automatic activation of calendar sets based on time of day. So the idea would be that now you used to be able to activate calendar sets based on location, but because we're now all stuck at home, except for the countries like Italy, thankfully, where we're now free to go outside again and to travel between regions, but most people around the world still can't. We're all working from home. And so now your schedule is not dictated by changing your location as much as it's dictated by the passing of time. And so now in Fantastical 3.1, you can automatically activate a calendar set at a specific time of day. So if, for example, you work on your personal projects from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. every morning, you can make sure that you only see your personal calendar and your personal task list at 9 a.m. every morning. And then maybe at 11 a.m. you want to switch to your work calendar, to your work calendar set. So if you're a heavy user of this feature of calendar sets, which again allow you to combine specific calendars with specific reminders lists or task lists in Fantastical, you can now activate those on a schedule in addition to a location change, which I think it's a very clever touch now that a lot of people around the world are still stuck at home.
Yeah, that is a really nice touch, and I haven't had a chance to try it out yet, but I'm really glad to see that, because I think that that'll come in more handy for me than location-based, since I work at home and don't really work elsewhere most of the day. I reviewed a game this week, and it's a Mac game, a classic Mac game. Way back, Federico, in 2006, a developer called Lost Minds came out with a game called the Sketch Fighter 4000 Alpha. And it was published by Ambrosia Software, which has since gone out of business.
I remember, though. Yeah.
Yes. Ambrosia had a whole catalog of Mac games back in the day. And this app came out in 2006, as I mentioned. And it's got this sketch style. It's a style like someone used a black pen in their notebook, or because it's on graph paper. And it's like these sketches that you might find in a teenager's notebook in high school coming to life. And it's just a really simple shooter arcade game where you use the arrow keys and the space bar, arrow keys to maneuver, space bar to shoot, and it works a little bit, the mechanics and the physics work a little bit like asteroids. There's kind of a momentum that carries you into walls and things and inflicts damage on your ship. And so the whole point of it is to get past the various obstacles and enemies, collect things along the way, and beat the bosses. And it's just a real simple but fun game that was no longer available since Ambrosia went out of business, but it's been rebooted and available on the Mac App Store now. And I really love it. It was one of the very first Mac games that I played, and it's $6.99 on the App Store. So check it out. It's definitely one of those things that when you need a break, you're sitting at your desk and you need a break, it's a great game to just play for like 10 or 15 minutes and then go back to work. It's got a great soundtrack too. It's very short, repetitive loop, but it's super catchy, and I guarantee that it'll get stuck in your brain if you play for more than like 5 minutes.
Very nice. All right, so it was a busy week on Mac Stories. We have more. I just want to give you a rundown of a bunch of other things that we covered. Castro, the podcast client, debuted a series of new shortcuts integrations. So you can now control Castro using Siri, or you can create custom shortcuts thanks to the new actions that they have for doing all kinds of things. You can control playback, you can control chapter skipping if you subscribe to Castro Premium. Very, very deep integration, and I kind of want to play around with this because the fact that you can control individual episodes as well as playback and effects, I think it's a very cool idea, and I want to play around with it. We covered the font case, which if you're a long time Mac Stories reader, this is not the same font case that I covered. I kind of feel old saying last decade.
Yes,
font case. Font case used to be a font manager for Mac OS X when it was called that. It was developed by the same people who would eventually go on to create Sketch.
Right.
Peter Omvli, the founder of Sketch, used to work on FontCase, which was an alternative to Fontbook, the default font manager by Apple. And FontCase was beautiful and all of that. That's in the past. Now, the new FontCase is a utility which the Icon Factory contributed to because it's an open source project by developer, and I need to get this right, developer Manolo Sanudo. And it's a very easy and intuitive way to install custom fonts on iOS and iPadOS using certificates, which is the old method, I know, but I think it's so much more intuitive and faster than, say, any font, or there was another utility called, I believe, Font that was based on a similar
Yes,
approach.
I think so.
What makes font cases my new favorite utility to do this is that it lets you import multiple files at once from with the files picker. Makes it super easy to load multiple fonts all at once, and then you can just install them with one tap. Super fast, super easy. There's no tracking. There's no weird things going on with the certificate. It's open source, so you can take a look at the code. And visually speaking, it's also very nicely done because it's got that Icon Factory flair to the entire UI, and you can preview the fonts inside the app, which is also a very nice touch. And if you're looking for a quick way and a free way, because this is also completely free and open source, font case on the App Store. Not the same font case that we reviewed on Mac Stories in 2010, but it's a new font case. It's a new generation of installing fonts on iOS and iPadOS. We also had a link to Stephen Hackett's story at 512 Pixels about rediscovering the benefits of the Breathe app for the Apple Watch. So especially now during stressful times for everybody, go check out that Stephen story. I really liked his angle and the fact that he had completely forgot about the Breathe app, and he started using it again, and had a very nice things to say about it. So I hope to see more mental health stuff, honestly, in WatchOS 7.
Too.
So I really hope to see that. And also, this is something that I don't fully understand because it's not available in Italy, but Apple Card now supports 0% financing for iPad, Mac, Apple TV, and other Apple devices, but not the Apple Watch, I believe. So I guess the idea would be that you have a 0% interest financing. So if you want to pay for your Mac or iPad or an Apple TV or iPhone in installments with monthly rates, you have a 0% interest rate.
That is correct. And someday, Federico...
But only if you have an Apple Card.
Yes. Someday I can bore you to tears explaining exactly what's going on in the background with that from my days as a lawyer. But yes, there's high finance happening in behind the covers of this, but it's a nice benefit for users who want to spread out their payments. All right, Federico, I want to turn very briefly to the club. We had a great issue of Weekly this week. I covered as a favorite Pixelmator Pro, which is a Mac app from Pixelmator. And it's an app that I rely on for a lot of our work at Mac Stories. I absolutely love it. We also had a very special collection this week. Usually the collections are written by one of us, but this week, because WWDC is coming up, we wanted to get some reactions from developers. And so we had a group of 6 developers who gave us predictions for what was coming in WWDC. So it'll be interesting to see how well those predictions came out. We had 6 bold individuals who joined us with their predictions. So take a look at those. Ryan also did an extension column that talked about keyboard shortcuts on the iPad and kind of making it a more robust experience, which is something I know that both of us would like, Federico. And we had sign up for a great giveaway this week, which is Steve Troughton-Smith's new app called Pastel, which is a color picker for iOS. So go check that out. It's a great app. Federico, you had something in Mac Stories Extras this week.
Yes, I did. So it's a very fun post, I think, about how to use the Mac Stories perspective icons and the shortcuts icons, not in OmniFocus and not in Shortcuts, which are the apps that they were originally designed for, but just how to use these custom icons elsewhere, which I think it's a very interesting approach. So I've been playing around with using the same icon files that I use for OmniFocus, that I use for Shortcuts, in different apps for iPhone and iPad and the Mac, thanks to your help, John. You really came in clutch with your Mac this week.
Yes, I did.
Because I really and again, this is a story that we're gonna share eventually in the future.
Yes.
But John's remote Mac Mini really helped this week as I was at the beach and I didn't have a Mac with me. So yeah, showing how these icons can be used in mind maps, in clipboard managers, in file managers. Go check it out. I have screenshots and I have a detailed explanation on how to install them and which version to use in issue 229 of Mac Stories Weekly.
All right, everybody. I want to talk to you a little bit about our sponsor for this episode and for all of Mac Stories this week, and that is Home Dash, a HomeKit dashboards app. Home Dash is a fantastic HomeKit app for both the iPhone, iPad, and the Apple Watch, and it's got this incredibly beautiful design that makes navigating big collections of devices a snap. Its dashboards are both flexible and easy to customize to meet your individual needs. There are a ton of features here, and I encourage everybody to go look at the post we had on Mac Stories that talks about this. There are scenes that can be organized into folders. There's also multi-device support that lets you control more than one device with a single tap, which is super powerful and something you can't do in Apple's Home app. There's also an Apple Watch app that can store your 10 favorite scenes, and if you force touch in the app, it allows you with a single tap to turn every single device off at once. It's a great way to kind of close down your house or your apartment for the day. This week only, Unwind listeners and Mac Stories readers can get Home Dash for just $9.99. This app does not go on sale very often, so this is a terrific deal that you really ought to take advantage of while you can, because it's really just this week. And because today's Friday, it's time to go download it. So go get your copy today. There'll be a link in the show notes and, of course, on Mac Stories where we cover this on Monday. Our thanks to Home Dash for their support of Unwind and Mac Stories. Okay, Federico, it's time for Unwind picks. Let's give everybody a little something to do before they start watching all those WWDC sessions.
All right, what you got for me?
All right, so I want to start with something. Because we have WWDC coming up, I wanted to recommend a documentary about General Magic, which is a company that was formed in 1990 by largely people who came from Apple and had this vision of creating a mobile device that would allow you to communicate wirelessly. It was an awful lot like what we know of today as a smartphone. But, we're talking 1990. We're talking not just 10 years before the iPhone, not just 10 years before, the Handspring Trio or whatever. We're talking, more than a decade of time before these things really caught on. And the punchline of General Magic is, I guess, that it was a failure in the end. The company had a big IPO. They brought in a lot of money. They burned through it. They made the devices. They actually designed the devices but didn't sell them themselves. They were made by companies like Sony, and Sony had a thing called Magic Link, and no one bought them hardly. But they were really innovative, and they worked on a private closed network designed by AT&T. At least in the United States, that's how it worked. And the problem they had in part was that they were getting ready to launch this right as the internet was taking off. And so they were using a closed communications network just as an open communications network was becoming a big thing. And that was part of what did them in. Plus, this company was spun off of Apple, and they were working closely with John Scully at Apple at the time, and he was launching the Newton, which competed with this device as well, which was another problem that they had. But this is a story about people like Andy Hertzfeld, Joanna Hoffman, Megan Smith, Andy Rubin, who went on to work on Android, Tony Fadell, who did the iPod, and all sorts of people who are big names now and were big names, a lot of them then, because they worked on like the original Mac team, and they had this vision for something that was not so much an extension of what was possible in 1990, but something that was 10, 20 years down the road. And perhaps it was too futuristic, and the technology wasn't there to do it in the 90s. But despite the company failing, it gave birth to all these ideas, and a lot of these people went on to do really important things, whether it was with the iPhone or the iPod or Android or other different things, including they had an engineer who went on to found eBay. So I mean, it was this hotbed of really smart people doing really hard work, and it's a really well edited and told story because it's both inspirational in terms of people with a vision for something that was actually going to move the needle forward with technology, but also dramatic and sad at times because these people were killing themselves with 18-hour days trying to create this thing from scratch, and then it failed, but also kind of hopeful in the end because it led to so many things 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. So I highly recommend it. You can get it on iTunes. It's also available to purchase on like Amazon and Xbox and Google Play, lots of different places. And if you have Showtime, they still have an Apple TV channel, by the way. Showtime has its streaming as part of that package, so you don't have to buy it separately. Anyway, I highly recommend it. It came out several months ago, but I just finally got around to watching it this week, and it kind of put me in the mood for seeing some new developments at WWDC.
Very nice. This is kind of the kind of content that I also appreciate, this kind of documentaries and stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna check this out myself. So unsurprisingly, this is literally gonna surprise nobody, but my Unwind pick for the week is a video game, and specifically an expansion of a video game. It's the DLC, the first DLC of Pokemon Sword and Shield. It came out a few days ago. It's called the Isle of Armor, and it's the first of a two-part DLC. The second one, called the Crown Tundra, will be released in the fall, or I believe this winter. But the Isle of Armor is available now, and it's the first expansion pass for Pokemon Sword and Shield, which there's a couple of things about it. First of all, it brings in more of the old Pokemon, especially the ones from the first generation of Pokemon. So if you played back in the day, like Pokemon Red and Blue, or Gold and Silver, or Ruby and Sapphire, this expansion does restore many of those Pokemon in the world of Sword and Shield, which if you didn't follow the news, last year there was a whole controversy with Nintendo and Game Freak, which are the creators of the Pokemon video game series, about the fact that they cut some of the older Pokemon from the latest versions for the Nintendo Switch. And now with the DLC, Game Freak and Nintendo are restoring and bringing back some of those old Pokemon. So if you're an offline player, if you just want to play the story, if you just want to catch them all, as they say, this DLC does restore. It unlocks a new area. It unlocks new items, new moves, new abilities, and of course, new Pokemon as well. If you are an online player like me, a competitive player, this expansion changes the game completely. The Pokemon Company just released today, as we're recording this a few minutes ago, the new rule set for the upcoming season of ranked double battles, Pokemon Sword and Shield, and it is completely different from what it used to be because of the DLC. Wow. So as someone who came back to competitive play last year with the release of Pokemon Sword on Nintendo Switch, spent a couple of months learning and studying, and I finally felt like I had some kind of grasp on multiplayer and competitive online play. Now I need to learn everything from scratch again, basically. Well, maybe not everything, because the basics still apply. But there's so much new information and options available because of this DLC. So if you bought the original game last year, I cannot recommend this expansion enough. You can pre-purchase, I believe, the Crown Tundra, which will be released in a few months. Right now, you will get some bonus content, as usual when you pre-order video games. In modern times, you always get some bonus stuff. But yeah, it's a lot more content, and it's fun whether you play offline, and especially if you play online, because it changes so much. And while I'm at it, I will give a shout out to Joe Merrick of Cerebi.net, which is just an institution, the Pokemon web, it's the Pokemon website when it comes to creating a database for all kinds of Pokemon and items and abilities and locations. And Joe has been doing an amazing, just incredible work this week, getting all the information about the game up on Cerebi.net. I probably mentioned this website on Unwind before, but I was reading Cerebi as a kid back in 1999, before I stopped playing Pokemon in my teenage years, and I picked up reading Cerebi, so the same website again 15 years later, and Joe is still working on it. So just an incredible person, an incredible website.
Yeah, the amount of effort and work that went into doing that very quickly after the DLC came out is just mind-blowing to me. And I'm really looking forward to digging into it too. I haven't yet, but I plan to over the weekend, just kind of unwind before we get busy with our coverage next week. And I probably
also the name of the show. So
exactly. And I should mention too that I ordered 20th Century Boys Volume 1 last week, right after we recorded and it came last weekend, and I've been reading just leisurely, like a chapter or two most nights, and I am really enjoying it. That's the manga series that Federico suggested last week, so definitely check it out. All right, everybody, that's a good place to stop. We'll be back again next week on Friday with a wrap-up of WWDC. I want to thank our sponsor again for this week's episode, and that is Home Dash. You can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net and, of course, on App Stories and Club Mac Stories and all the great Mac Stories locations. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.